Hey guys, Brody here. Today we're going to be talking about route level authentication in your React application. We're going to be going into some higher order component concepts. We're going to be talking about context in React 16.3, I think the version was, and some other more in-depth concepts. I'm going to try to make this a shorter video and try to make it easy to absorb. So to switch over to my project, I'm going to actually show you the layout of the directory structure. And I have everything on my GitHub. I'll have a link to the project below so you can clone that and mess around with some stuff. So just to walk you through what the project looks like, I have just basic setup. I have my basic Babel config. I have my source folder, which has all of my React mounting. I've got right now just a browser router and then my app. My app is just a simple header and my router. The header gets fed some links, home link, and then a dashboard link. And this is the route that we're going to be authenticating today. As you can see, we have require auth true. I'll show you what that's going to do in a second here. Anyway, to go into the header component here, I'm going to just go top down. The header component just takes in some links, maps over them, and then renders a link component for every link object in that array. The link component is a simple stateless component that just checks for if the require auth is true and the user's not logged in, then we're going to just return null. Otherwise, it's going to render this link. Going back up the chain, we have, let me go back. So we have our router. So the router is just a simple switch. On the home route or the default route, we have our home component rendering. For a dashboard, we have the dashboard component, which we're going to be authenticating, and then we have this unauthenticated route. And to show you what this looks like, I can go back to my browser here, and this is it. So it's pretty ugly. Just wanted to show you guys something simple. I have my home route. I have this dashboard link. And right now it takes you to dashboard, but we don't want that. We want to get kicked out if we try going to dashboard. We want to be redirected somewhere else. And then we have this login button that'll come into play later. So for this video, we're going to be building out a couple different components. We're going to be building out a provider, which is going to be similar to what Redux does, or MobX, whatever state management library you're familiar with. This provider is just going to be using context to pass props down implicitly to our components, and we can subscribe to them via the with user. And then we're going to have with auth, which is a higher order component that subscribes to the user context with user, and then just does some basic logic to say if the user's not logged in, redirect them somewhere. If they are logged in, render the component that's being fed in. So that's how we're going to do it. Let's jump into the UserProvider code. To get started, I'm coding along with this, so if I get a little distracted or delayed, just bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and import React from React, and I'm going to try to explain everything that I'm doing. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create some context. So I'm going to go ahead and import prop types, by the way, because my lender is going to freak out if I don't. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and export const. I'm going to call it user context equals react.create context. And this is a function, and the first parameter that gets passed to React context or create context is the default context that you want. Right now, it's just going to be an empty object. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and create a class called UserProvider. It's going to extend React.component. I'm going to have some state here. I'm going to have a render function, obviously, which is going to, for now, we want to render this user context.provider. And I'll explain to you what this is going to do in a second. Also, I have a video on context that I'll have linked below. You should check that out. Explain some of this stuff more in depth. So the thing that you're going to pass to a provider, the prop that you're going to pass to this context provider is going to be the value of what you want to provide to lower level components. So we're going to be passing in the logged in state. So we're going to say is logged in, and that's going to be coming from our state here, which we'll just structure and render. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the object property shorthand for that. I'm going to destructure is logged in from this .state. I'm going to go ahead and create that state here. I'm going to say false because obviously they're not going to be logged in when they first the app first mounts. So cool. So we have our basic state or value that we're passing into the provider, and we want to render some children inside of it, just like a top level provider would. So I'm going to peel that off of props and just right there. And then I'm going to create my prop type for that because my lender is not going to like that. Children prop types dots, I think it's node that is required. Don't quote me on that. Okay, cool. So preferred default export. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and export this, export default user provider. We're getting a nice little lesson on ESLint too, so hopefully that helps. Okay, cool. So we have our user provider. So I go back to my browser, everything's golden. Let me open up the inspector just to make sure. Yep, okay, cool. So I'm going to, just to walk through what we have so far one more time. We have a user provider, which is passing this value to any children that is rendered inside of it. We have some basic state, is logged in false. We have a prop type, pretty simple stuff. We have our context. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap our whole app with it because we want to provide that to everything inside of our app. So we have our import app. I'm going to go ahead and import user provider from components / user provider. And I'm going to do the same thing that browser router is doing, or what you've seen with provider with Redux. So there we go. Just going to render children, refresh, everything's good still. Okay, cool. So let's go back to user provider. We have is logged in being passed in, which is great, that's what we want, but we want a way to actually log a user in. So we're actually going to pass in another property here called actions. And this is actually going to be equal to a getter. I like doing this. There's other ways of doing this. I just like structuring it like this. And this getter, actions getter, is going to just return an object. And we're going to call one of the values in this on login. And it's going to be equal to this.handle login. And what handle login is going to do is it's going to log that user in. And in real world scenario, in your production ready application, you're going to have some logic around this. You're going to be taking in like a token, a JWT token, parsing it, storing it in local storage, and then the user will be logged in. Then you would trigger this change here. But we're not going to do that. This is just demo purpose. I'm sure you guys can deduce a different conclusion or a different method of logging a user in just based off of this simple demo. So what this is going to do is it's going to just say is logged in true. And then, so we're going to provide the is logged in state and then the actions down to whoever subscribes to this. So I'm going to save this. Everything is still going to be good. I'm going to switch over to this with user component now. And I'm going to delete that quick. This with user component is going to now subscribe to that context. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import that. We're going to say, what did we name that? Let's go back here. User context. So import destructured import because we're assigning this to the exports object. We're not doing a default export. So import destructured user context from .. user provider. Okay. And now let's create our higher order component which subscribes to this. So let's say const with user. This is pretty much the go-to name and syntax for higher order components in React. So with something, with this, with that, with user. And this is going to take in your composed component. So composed components. Get rid of this nastiness. It's going to return a function which takes in your props since you're going to be wrapping this, and the components that's actually rendered is going to be this right here, which is going to feed props to the composed component. And then what this is going to return is this is going to return this user context just like we did earlier, but it's going to be the consumer version. Earlier we did the provider. So this is how you say I want to consume a value from the top level context provider in React. And then all you have to do is just pass a function as a child. So usually what you do is you pass children, whether it be a div or another component, but this time we're going to be doing the same thing, but it's going to be a function. And this is going to take a value, a parameter, which is our context value, which we described right here. So it's an object coming in. So let's go ahead and just name this user. And then what we're going to do is we're going to render our composed components. We're going to spread in props, and then we're going to say, just go ahead and spread this in too. Screw it. Okay, so that should do it. Let's go ahead and export that. Export default with user. Save that. Should be good, yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and hook this up quick. Let's hook this up to one of our components. So let's go into pages, let's go home, and import this with user. // components, components / with user. Come on, there we go. And all we have to do is just wrap, export default, this wrapped home component with user. I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to take in props here, and I'm just going to go hello from home and just check. Let's just see what these props are for now. Save this, go back to our browser. Missing the semicolon. Great. What page is that on? Index 27. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay, let's refresh. Hello from home. So what do we have? We have is logged in false. That's from our context provider since we're wrapping this at the bottom. And then we have actions on login. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So if you noticed before, if you remember, we have this link component, which is accepting is logged in from props. And if the user is not logged in and require auth is true, then it's going to return null, which is what it's doing right now because is logged in is false in the default props. But what we're going to do is we're going to hook this up to make this a little bit more dynamic. So we're going to go ahead and import with user the same thing that we just did a second ago on our home component. So I'm going to import with user. I'm going to wrap this sucker, save it. Everything should be fine or not. Okay. Why is this just now? Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I get for coding while I record this. Okay, so everything's still good. So now why don't we go ahead and see what it looks like to log the user in on the home page. So right now this button's doing nothing. We're going to add a click handler to it on click. And I think we said it was actions equals this dot prop. So we're passing in that context value of actions. We're going to say actions.onLogin is the handler for this. Oop. So let's save that and just see what happens now that we have our link component hooked up to state. So when I log in, there's the dashboard icon. And that is because, once again, I have this wrapped with user. And this logic here is saying if require auth is true, which dashboard does require auth, and is logged in is false, we're going to return null. But now is logged in is true. So I can go to this page, which is what we want conceptually, but this dashboard component or page is still not authenticated because I can refresh this, clear that state, and still go to that dashboard route when we're not logged in, which is what we don't want. So we have one more component to set up, and then we can call this a day. Honestly, this is pretty good simple demo. But if I go to with user now, or I'm sorry, with auth, this is the component we're going to be hooking up. So we're going to need a few things. Obviously, React. We're going to need prop types, and then we're going to need redirect. And this is where the interesting stuff happens. So I'm going to go ahead and import our with user because we want to subscribe to that context here from .. with user. And just bear with me here. I'm going to explain everything. I'm going to code it up and try to explain it, but it's going to look kind of weird, and then I'm going to explain it more in depth. So I'm going to say const with auth takes in some options. Don't worry about that right now. I'll explain that in a second. It's going to return a function that takes in your composed component, whatever you're wrapping. Return a function that takes in props, and then we're going to do some stuff in here. Actually, let's back up a second. We're going to take in a function. With auth is going to be a function that takes in options, returns a function that takes in our composed component, and then we're going to be doing some logic in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another function inside of here, which is going to be a component. We're going to say const auth, which is going to take in props, and this is going to return compose component, just like that. We're going to spread in props. I can actually delete these parentheses. And what we're going to say is we're going to take a few things off of these props here. So we're going to say const is logged in, because that's coming from our provider, equals props. So we're going to destructure that. And we're going to say if the user is not logged in, I want to redirect somewhere. We don't know where yet. We're going to say just home for now, but we'll add some functionality around that. Let's try to fix some of this stuff. And we're going to add some prop types to this real fast. So auth.prop types equals is logged in. It's going to be prop types.bool that is required. And then what we're going to do is, this is kind of the mind-blowing part. So we're going to return auth here. We're going to return auth, but we're going to wrap it with user. And I guess for now we can kind of ignore these options. We'll come back to that in a second. And then I'm going to export default this with auth. So let me just explain one more time what this is doing. So this is a component, a higher order component that for now takes in nothing, but we're going to take in some options here in a second. It returns a function that takes in your composed component. So when we use this, it's going to look like this. Watch me. So say I have a home component. I'm going to say export default. Pretend I'm exporting this home component. Export default with auth. I'm going to end up passing in some type of configuration object, whatever that may be. And then you call the return function with home or whatever your component is. And the reason we do this is for composability. And that'll be on another video sometime in the future. But I'm sure you've seen this syntax before with connect or another provider library. Okay, so let's save this. Now we can go ahead and use this in our dashboard component. And this dashboard component is super simple. It's just rendering some JSX. But I'm going to import with auth from // component / with auth. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to say wrap this. I'm going to pass in an object that we're going to use in a second, and then wrap with dashboard with it. So let's save that. Looks like everything's good. So I'm going to try going to the dashboard. Before, if you guys remember, I would click on this dashboard link and it was letting me go to dashboard. Now it should keep me on this page because it's going to instantly redirect me since I'm not logged in. So let's try it. So I'm clicking this. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm clicking go to dashboard and nothing's happening. I can try the URL as well. So yeah, just like that, it's gonna redirect me. And if I try logging in, you see the dashboard link showed up because I'm now logged in, and I can go to dashboard. So this is obviously working. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to add some configuration around this higher order component here. So I like adding like redirect location, and then I like telling my app where to take me if the user is unauthenticated on this specific route. So I'm going to say unauthenticated. I think that's what I named that route. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to with auth here, and I'm going to pull off that property from that object, redirect location. And I'm going to default this to just / just in case someone forgets to provide it. Okay, so let's try this, save that. Okay, so that worked. So I refreshed and that dashboard component tried mounting, but I was unauthenticated. I wasn't logged in. So it redirected me to /unauthenticated, and then I got this little component rendered. So let's try it again. I'll refresh. I'm not logged in. I'll try going to dashboard, and I get redirected here. So as you can see, this is pretty not really simple stuff, but once you get the hang of higher order components and context, it's pretty simple to whip something up like this. And like I said earlier, your login functionality in your provider will be more complex than this. You'll have some logic around parsing a token that's in local storage when the user goes to the page. If it exists, you'll log them in. If not, you'll have to let them log in manually. So yeah, this is just a bare bones example of how you could do this. And if you wanted to go more in depth, I'll go ahead and add another handler here real quick. If you want to stop watching the video now, you can. This is just kind of bonus footage, I guess. But I'm going to go ahead and add a logout button or a logout handler and a logout. And this is going to be passed down in our actions. So now I can go to home here and I can add a new button. And I'm going to say click to log out. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to add this to the dashboard so you can see what it looks like to log out and get redirected. So give me just a second here. I'm going to code this up quick. Return actions equals props. I am lazy, so I'm going to copy this prop types. And on logout, click to log out. Okay, so I'll save this, and to show you what it looks like to wrap a component twice with two higher order components, I can do this const component with auth equals with auth dashboard, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to say with user. I got to import this in a second. Oh, it did. Cool. So this is what it looks like if you had compose. If you had like low-fp going and you had a compose function, you can compose these together, but that's not a dependency in my project right now, so I'm going to ignore that. But let me save this. Okay, so I'm going to go home, try going to dashboard. It won't let me. Click to log in, go to dashboard, log out, and if this works correctly, I kind of just coded it up. I don't know 100%, but if I log out, it should then boot me back to home, and it should get rid of this link. And that's what it does. So it booted me to unauthenticated, and now the link is not there. I have to re-log in. So yeah, so that concludes the video. If you have any questions, I know this is kind of a lot of information. If you have any questions about how context works more in depth, or how you just can't understand how higher order components work, I'll have my email and Twitter linked below. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I know I said it wasn't going to get this long, but it kind of did. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.